We are joined now on the Warhorse Sportsbook Hotline by our guy Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Mitch, what's going on?
Morning, guys. How are you?
Mitch, my friend, I've missed you. It's that we can actually do more than text now. We can talk to each other as on a job level.
It's great to see you. It's been since a cold day in the corner of Memorial Stadium a couple of months ago since we last got together.
Yeah, wasn't that something? Without my teeth clicking, I did admire your ability to control your
coldness.
Yes, yes, it's very admirable. I'm like, in my head, it's funny. Like, you never know what people are thinking when you're really talking to them, because I didn't have to say anything at first. I was like, how is he
Not
sitting
freezing
still?
I didn't have to sit out there for an hour, but
the setup for that was miserable too. Like, clip it right, and they didn't want to hear wind, so you had to put the little muff thing on, and it was very finite. And I'm like, it's like 1 degree out here. I'm ready to go inside. That's
the episode that they should do outside in October, or even to preview the spring game if there's ever an opportunity for that, like with a late April episode.
Shout out to Gavin, Felix, and Big Red Wrap Up. That corner, there was no sun over there. Jay Moore was blocking what little light I had because he's like 6'13". I don't know. It's a big dude. Good to see you though, Mitch.
You guys too. You playing that quote out of the commercial. Really interesting. The part that Matt Rhule said in that interview the other night on the Huskers Radio Network about how you and I don't have to listen to the same music. We don't have to like the same food. But if I look over and I see you paying a price and I'm paying the same price, then I know I can count on you when things get hard. I wrote that down the other night, not because I was going to use it in an article, but because I'm going to use it in life, in, whether it's coaching my kids' team or whatever it might be, in some aspect of me going about my business. I thought that was super powerful, what he said. And obviously it's applicable to the Nebraska football team as they go through off-season training, and maybe it will factor into a story that I wrote. But I was that kind of taken by that comment. It's like where the preacher's son in Matt Rhule really comes out, and you can see when he says stuff like that what it is like to stand in front of him in a locker room or on a football field when he's trying to rally the guys, whether it's before kickoff, halftime, or just on at a February workout.
2 things, Mitch. This is why we get along, and I enjoy talking to him totally unsolicited. Number 1, he's always inquiring about my dad, like doing research and stuff. So I sent him a thing yesterday about my dad, and I said he would have been a big Coach Rhule fan because, and all I had in my head was that quote right there, the one that Mitch just read, which I think is beautiful. Now, why does that resonate with me? Mitch, I'm not going to spill the tea, but I'll tell you, in our locker room, during a very tumultuous time, potentially with 2 competitive quarterbacks, a very similar sentiment was shared by a captain about those 2 guys on how and why we had to come together. Very different guys, very different styles. You don't have to like this. You don't have to gravitate towards that. But at the end of the day, we go through the same thing. So let's get our ass in gear, get it together, pull in the same direction. We have a goal. We have something we want to accomplish. Me listening to Coach Rhule say that gave me goosebumps real time because it's applicable about a multitude of things. And I know Coach Rhule, there's no way he knows that. I mean, nobody's telling him. He might. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, good point. The dude is a Berean. He does a lot of homework. But I can't believe you read that this morning. Like, that's who he is. That is exactly who he is.
That's maybe that's why the comment resonated to me too, because it spoke to me about a different time in the history of the program. Not necessarily about a time where championships were won, but about a time when there was a brotherhood that he's trying to recreate.
Yeah.
Mitch, it's funny that DB brought up that quarterback scenario because we were talking about that earlier this week, and I tried to explain to him from somebody on the outside, just looking back at it and hearing these stories about, there were these
on Monday
kind of two sides to the locker room. One guy wanted Brooke, one guy wanted Tommy, and I tried to explain to him that navigating that and still having everyone on the same page might be the most impressive thing that any of those teams did, because the only other time you hear about a locker room split, quote unquote, where one guy's going for one quarterback, the other group's going for another quarterback, is when the season has gone totally off the rails. You never hear that story in a successful season, and that was potentially the best college football team of all time.
It's because of the things Mitch read.
Right, but that's what I mean. Like, that is one of the rarest things I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah, I would agree. That's not usually the storyline for a championship team. So that's part of what makes that era of Nebraska football so unique.
So let me ask you something, Mitch, because we talk about this in on the other side, where a different time in their life, a coach may have done this, or he's been seasoned or she's been experienced enough for this time around, or they've learned because of this. I was thinking about this and talking to you this morning. You've been around, you've done a lot, you know a lot. How important is it from the media standpoint when you're getting a new coach in his tenure that it's a different phase in your life too, whether you're more experienced or more patient or less patient or have more in your repertoire that you've seen to compare and contrast, where you'd maybe treat Coach Rhule or whomever the new coach is differently because of the timing that you're engaging in your life? Does it happen for media too?
Yeah, because everybody's got that human element, and I'm clearly connecting. And when I say connecting, I just mean like the ability to communicate. So I can clearly communicate with Matt Rhule, who is separated in age with me by like 30 days, much differently than I could with Tom Osborne or with Frank Solich or with Bill Callahan. I mean, so that's just part of a human to human interaction. And, clearly, if you're asking about the media, the way the wheels turn,
you've seen it, been through so much,
right? That leads to a different ability to be able to do my job. So it's about perspective. And in my case, in covering college sports, a lot of it at Nebraska, but not all of it. There's 30 years of perspective, close to 30 years to be able to draw on. And hopefully, that's something that comes through in the content that's produced, but specifically in a human to person interaction with, it could be Matt Rhule, it could be Tony White, it could be Evan Cooper, whoever it is on the staff. There's experiences there that I can draw on, or that you can draw on, or somebody else in that press conference room can be able to look back on in their life, and it definitely helps shape the the questions that are asked, and in the way the information is delivered when it comes out to the fans.
So I want to tell you where that question was birthed. I'm on a group text with a lot of former guys, and we were talking about the differences in media. And it was, well, this guy isn't covering sports anymore. He's not around. And, well, he's seen this, and there's a compare and contrast. And I always wondered, because I said this the first time around when I was doing the show, I said, there are some things that Coach Rhule is saying that a lot of good coaches say. We're just not used to it. So we're still kind of and like, oh my gosh, like
we're enamored by it.
This is so refreshing.
Yeah.
So I always wonder from somebody that has your vantage point.
Yeah.
Is this relative to Coach Rhule because you think it's the right thing to do, or is this in comparison to what you've seen and heard and you're comparing to from just where you're meeting him right where you're at?
Well, I mean, I'll take myself or any media out of the equation, because Matt Rhule can verbalize without our help. He's a strong enough speaker that, he could just get on a YouTube channel and say all the things that he wants to say and get the same points across oftentimes without us up there stumbling through questions to ask him at a press conference. But I had a similar conversation with somebody yesterday about the message that he delivers on, and this was about Tony White, and about how I think you kind of referenced this. Like, a lot of coaches you think would say this and should say this, but it's not something that you generally hear, and it's certainly not something that you see put into action the way that he has seemingly put it into action. And I'm talking about him stumping for Tony White, his number one guy, his most valuable piece of the coaching staff, his $1.6 million defensive coordinator. And here we are in February, and he's still out there stumping for him to get a job at a school that is coming into the Big Ten and is on Nebraska's schedule next season. Yeah. So, making a call to the athletic director at that school, that's going above and beyond. And these are things that you would think a head coach should do. Like, if there's 130 head coaches out there, most of them, I think, if asked about one of their coordinators getting a job at another school, would say, I want the best for that guy. Very few of them, I think, would do it unsolicited and then go and make that call and talk about it publicly and continue to beat that drum and really put their actions behind what they're saying. So that's a case, I think, where it seems like this should be a pretty cut and dry issue. Like, of course, head coaches want their assistants to have opportunities, but it's a lot more rare than you might think that they actually say it in the way that he says it and then go do it like he has, especially at this time of year when it's very difficult to find a replacement.
We're talking with Mitch Sherman from The Athletic on the Warhorse Sportsbook Hotline. Mitch, you mentioned kind of how, that whole sequence would have been to Nebraska's detriment in the immediate, right? Like, it would have been they would have been worse off for losing Tony White in this moment, right? And whenever Tony White does leave for a head coaching job, which seems inevitable, they will be worse off for it. And then I take that, and then I take it back to the quote you read of, if they're willing to pay the same price I am, they're paying the same price I am, then that's somebody that you can trust, you can count on. And then I go over to the other side of the ball with the coordinators. And you see the sacrifices being made on that side of the ball, where Marcus Satterfield is maybe sacrificing a little bit of his comfort in having Glenn Thomas be on as offensive coordinator and be willing to say, hey, this is what's best for the team, even if maybe professionally it's not what's best for me. How important is it to not only have your coaching staff talk like that, but then in the actual going about of hiring coaches and assigning roles and things like that, you actually see it play out as well in the way they act?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way that Nebraska's restructured its offensive staff is a reflection of the expectations that Matt Rhule and these coaches have for their players in the program. They're asking guys to sacrifice for the betterment of the guy next to them in the locker room. And sure, for Marcus Satterfield to go from coaching the quarterbacks, the most high-profile position on the team, to taking on the tight ends, it can be perceived. And I think Matt Rhule's gone out of his way to make it clear that this is not a demotion. This is not like something that should be a hit for him as far as like his own prestige or what his ego. But, some people aren't going to hear that. Some people, whether they're in Nebraska or out of Nebraska, are going to look at this coaching staff. They're going to hear anything that Matt Rhule says in the offseason, and they're going to call up the bios of the coaches in August or September next year, and they're just going to make comments about, and it's going to be a storyline that people hear in the Big Ten or nationally, that, hey, they replaced their quarterback's coach, or they got Satterfield some help as with a co-offensive coordinator, and that part of it is accurate. But for Rhule and his coaches, there's a real push to not have that be the priority. They're gonna make their moves, they're gonna say what this is, and then they're gonna move on and do their jobs. And that's the expectation that they have for their players too. If you play a position and somebody else comes in who's better at that position, and you've got to make a shift and do something to be able to help the team, then that's what's expected of you in the Nebraska program. So it only makes sense in a functional environment in that if it's expected of the coaches, then it should be expected of the players, and vice versa.
Unbelievable. Like, so I go back to conversation we had. This is when he first got here, and he was talking about getting players to turn the corner and believe. And he said he was talking to a player in particular, and he said, I've done this a long time. I've got NFL experience. I've got combine experience. I have your best interest at heart. Why would you want to be combative with me in practice? Like, I am for you. And he said, he's like, Damon, this takes time because you have to model the behavior. So when I'm listening to you, the power and the practical application of being who you say you're going to be, if I can cheer and champion Tony White to go get a job, and it could momentarily hurt me but help him, why, if I'm Taman Lynham, wouldn't I listen to Coach Rhule if he says, hey man, if you just do this, this can happen for you? Or if I'm Gifford, and hey, if you stick around just one more time, make the sacrifice, you can get this on the other end. Like, those real life applications, they seem simple, but certainly aren't easy.
Yeah, I think a lot of times people probably underestimate how much the players are watching and how much they see everything that's going on around the program. So if you are one of those players and you've had the head coach or one of the assistant coaches come to you and say, we're going to ask you to do this because, while it may look like a setback in the short term, it's going to be a benefit for you down the road, either like professionally or in your college career. They're more apt to do it because they see the way that the whole operation works at a larger level. Sometimes we think the players just come in, get their practices in, get their lifting in, and watch film, and then they're on their way. But that's obviously not the reality of it. They're living and breathing and sleeping the football, just like in many ways, just like the staff is. So they know what's going on. They know the inner workings of things. They see probably more than even the staff believes that they see or expects that they see, and they're going to model some of their behaviors and their patterns in the way that they go about their business after the as a result of the observations that they make.
Mitch, I'm been wondering about this a little bit over the last week or so since we started hearing from Glenn Thomas a little bit. And I know you wrote a story about the culture fit of Glenn Thomas with Matt Rhule. And so I asked DB this and we didn't really have an answer. So I'm just curious if you have any insight to maybe the reasoning behind why Glenn Thomas wasn't on the staff, I guess, from the beginning. I know there was the Jake Peets thing a little bit last year as quarterbacks coach. Was it just simply the fact they had an opportunity to move back to the NFL and wanted to give that a shot? Or do you have any insight there? I've been really curious about that.
No, I don't. I mean, I think it was a timing thing with Thomas, and he was coming from Arizona State, and I don't know what we've only had those 20 minutes on Monday with him to kind of dive into his career and the path that he took. So I'm looking forward, whether it'll probably be this spring to be able to get with him one-on-one and talk about why he chose to go back to the NFL. I don't know that he had an opportunity a year ago. You have to kind of match up the dates. I mean, he may have just taken the job with the Steelers when Matt Rhule was starting to put together a staff, or maybe it was the opposite. Rhule got his staff together first, and they like you said, they were pursuing another guy, Jake Peets, who was in the NFL, and but that oftentimes, like, there's good fits out there from a coaching standpoint, and they don't work just because the timing doesn't match up. And without knowing the details of it, that's probably where I would look first. And also, Thomas, his career springboarded the first time he went to the NFL and was with the Falcons. So in the place that he was at last year, perhaps he was looking to take his career in a different direction and get that springboard again. So go spend some time in the NFL with the Steelers and use that as a jump to get himself either to another level in the NFL or to come back into college. But, the fact is that he would have been a good fit for Nebraska a year ago with the way that Matt Rhule was putting the staff together. It just didn't piece together. And he is a good fit now. No matter how this thing works out, there's no question how it works out with the quarterbacks and their development and what the path that Dylan Raiola and Daniel Kaelin's careers and Heinrich Haarberg's careers take from here. No matter what, the one thing that is that Rhule and Satterfield and Thomas are a fit because they've done it before, not just at one school, they've done it at two schools.
Interesting. At the end of the day, before we get you out of here, Mitch, seems like 3 is the number. Glenn, Coach Tom, I want 3 guys ready. Is it a blessing, excuse me, that the quarterback scholarship numbers are a little low, probably not ideal heading into spring, so you can focus on getting whatever 3 guys ready to play since that's the goal? Or do you think at some point down the road you go back and get a 4th because we've seen it evaporate in a hurry around here?
Yeah, there can be times where you need a 4th in the season. I think it really just depends on, one, all 3 of those guys staying healthy through the spring, and 2, just what they see from their development. Heinrich Haarberg is the wild card in this because they would like to use him in a role where he can really be a contributor to this offense. I mean, that means being on the field.
They would like that even a year ago, right?
Yeah, right. If things would have worked out the way that was intended with Jeff Sims, Heinrich Haarberg could have been in that role in 2023. So they're giving this thing another shot. And if everything's a go with Dylan, and they've got a situation, and this is the way I would project it. This is that they've got a situation with Kaelin where he can come in and, get 4 games or 3 games and just be a developmental guy in the program. I mean, this is again, the way it projects.
Yeah, myopic. Yeah.
Tools that they're bringing to the table. And that's all good. And Heinrich can be your Swiss Army knife. Then I think they'll entertain the idea of going and getting a 4th guy. But that's all got to play out in the spring. So I could still see it going either way.
It's Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Mitch, good stuff as always. We'll catch up with you again soon.
Thanks, guys. Good to talk to you.
Thanks, Mitch.
That's Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Coming up next, we're going to talk a little bit of Omaha Supernovas with Coach Kuhn here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.